right now, chat? I'm supposed to be telling you the story of the Dalai Lama. Actually, I should start at the start, right? So I was born in Scotland on September the 11th. So I was at high school. I went to one high school. I was there for a week. It was the one close to my primary school. The primary school I went to was one of the worst in Edinburgh, one of the worst areas in Edinburgh. It wasn't the worst, maybe, but it was right up there. And back in when I was 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, there wasn't really much of a range of difference between shithole places and other shithole places. Like, they were all just sort of one big type of shithole. Primary school was a really rough school. It was really rough. Yet still I got expelled in less than a week. And the school that would take me in, was only a few schools that will take you in when you get expelled from that one, was there in the centre of town, which I didn't enjoy either. And I was again expelled from that school. But I managed to last a couple of years, which meant that Rocky had joined me at high school. People had recognised how intelligent he was, so he'd in demand from other schools, so to speak, compared to me, relative to me, who nobody fucking wanted me at their school at this point. So my mum and dad, who are both Irish, decided that perhaps there would be a chance for me in Ireland. Christian Brothers Grammar School took me in because of Rocky, because he was so smart and they wanted him there. Love Rocky. Brother, brilliant guy. He really helped me out there. Fucking hated it, right? I hated everything about when I first arrived in Ireland. I liked it all, but on the second night I was there, we moved into this house next door. There was this chick who was quite hot. I asked if she'd show me around, so we went for a walk that evening around this tiny little village. It had one shop, maybe two shops. It had a couple of shops at that point, and it had about 8 bars, and it had about 1,000 people in the village, and about 50,000 sheep. Anyway, that's probably an exaggeration on the number of sheep, but there was a lot of them. There was also a lot of cows. We were walking around this town, and we walked through this little gate, and we walked underneath this shadowy bit, and this group of lads had seen me, and they'd heard my Scottish accent, and they thought they'd teach me a lesson. This is in a very bigot part of Northern Ireland. It was a Catholic area, and I was a Catholic family, and I was at a Catholic school, but those people didn't take the time to ask. For one of them grabbed a rock as I was walking past, and he smacked me in the side of the face with it, cracked my eye socket, and to get away from them I fell on a different rock and cracked my kneecap. Managed to get home, and that was within 24 hours of arriving in Ireland, I was like, fuck, here we go again. Yeah, so this was me in Ireland thinking like, fuck, this place is a bit tough. But at the same time, in reaction to that event that evening, my gran, who knew some people, and generally speaking, a lot of people knew her, phoned up the local Sinn Féin politician, had him speak to his friends in the clandestine connections they all have between each other. And some of the local enforcers came around and visited the people who had attacked me and left them in no uncertain terms that they wouldn't be fucking doing it again. At that point I realised that there was a space for me in this place which felt so unlike home. Teachers at my school, which a number of them, had connections to this clandestine organisation, who were then looked at me with a sympathetic eye, and so my life got slightly better in certain ways, which I was very lucky and grateful for. But that didn't change a lot of people's perspective at this school I was at, right? Because I wasn't particularly interested in like, I'll tell anyone to go fuck themselves, like, obviously, right? And so when you've got that attitude and you're somewhere new, you end up telling quite a lot of people to go fuck themselves. And like, so I wasn't desperately out there trying to make friends. There's like big run-in fights, right? Like big, huge run-in fights with like buses trying to get out of the way of people running over kids' feet, and like people glassing windows, and like lots of violence. And anyway, at one point a guy took a big massive fuck off knife into school with a big story about what he was going to do to me with it. He was quite a big guy. So then when he was walking out the door, I kicked a little living fuck out of him from behind, and I got suspended from that school at that point. Still would always make the same decision looking back. There was like a various pressures on the school. One, because they hadn't managed to in any way provide a safe environment for me to learn in, right? Which there isn't when there's hundreds of people who want to kick your head in every 5 minutes, and people bringing weapons to school and all the rest of it. I'm sure there's a few people who understand. Anyway, on the other hand, like, I was like not sitting down and being quiet, so, and they found that unusual. And those teachers who had my back went out of their way to make my school experience much more suitable for my personality. Rocky and I were running the poetry club at the time. The headmaster said, Jamie, I think what we can do, editor of the school magazine. Anyway, needless to say, it was a fucking brilliant rip-roaring hilarity every issue that came out under my editorial direction. And so the first thing I decided to do with this newfound sense of responsibility was look up what I was going to write about in this magazine, right? What we were going to talk about. No, before that happened, just before I was given this job, I was suspended. I was walking along in this place, in this little village where we lived, where the mountains of Mourne roll down to the sea, and our house was right at the sea, and there's a beautiful little harbour, with the mountains right behind you, and this one of the oldest oak forests in the world, stretching right down with the trees right into your garden, and then your house right on the beach. It's a long, little, really, really ancient harbour just along at the side, and it was just really pretty. And on that harbour, there's a nice bench that looks out over one of the best views you'll ever see in your life. And I'd often go and sit on that bench. I was going for a walk. I saw these robed figures on the edge of the pier, and there was lots of glinting and shimmering, and so I walked that little bit further than I would have normally. I saw they were monks, and they were putting together this huge ornate sculpture that they'd made out of gold. And here's Rocky, hi Rocky, and whatever. I mean, I felt like saying, nearly said precious gemstones there, but there were loads of really expensive and nice things on it, and lots of craft and artwork that had gone in it, and it was expensive, and it was really nice, this precious thing that looked fragile that they were building. And as I got closer and closer to them, I could see that they were picking it up, and they were swinging it, and as with horror, I realized that what they were doing was they were going to fuck this thing into the sea, right? This huge, expensive looking thing. So I was like, what's going on? Thinking, well, they're obviously doing it on purpose, right? I'm not going to rush up and stop them. But I also was fascinated with what was going on. And so I watched them throw this thing into the sea and then do these chants, mesmerized by it all. And then they started to walk back up, and I said hello to them and asked them what they were up to. And they explained that the Dalai Lama was coming to Northern Ireland to do an honorary degree from Queen's University, Belfast. They were from South Africa and Thailand and other places, and they were friendly with each other, and they were traveling around in the hope of meeting the Dalai Lama, in the hope that they would be able to in some way meet him. I mean, this is me abbreviating what they were saying. If you are Buddhist and you notice that they didn't want to do that, they were trying to do other things. Sure, I completely understand, right? They were trying to do good, and they were in the same place as the Dalai Lama at the same time, and maybe there was a chance they would meet, and it would be for positive reasons. And so that was their idea. And one of the things they were doing was this tribute, which involved them, as he explained, giving away, just giving, and not even to someone in particular, and that they put effort into these things, into making it beautiful, into making it nice, which was what I appreciated. Had absolutely no connection to their idea of keeping the thing, right? That their rewards from they didn't get any joy from that possession of it. It was from the making of it, and then this idea of giving it away. So that was my first touch of thinking wow, this is slightly different, from the extreme environments and philosophies that I've been living under. That was very different. And I said to the guy, whoa, you've got to come and eat dinner at our place, right? My mum and dad will cook you food. You come to our place tonight or tomorrow night. We'll all have a big meal. And you're all invited. And they said yes, right? And I was like, sweet, they said yes. How unusual. This is great. Really pays to talk to people and be nice. And then it was only later on I realised that they're obligated to say yes, and they can't really say no. So at this point, I had assumed that they were really eager to be friends, right? And to be nice, which they may well have been. I'm not saying they weren't, but they were also felt sort of obligated when someone offers them something to accept it. So later, the next evening, they came round for dinner. And I told Mum and Dad, obviously, look, there's these monks all coming for dinner. And they were like, oh, right, Jamie, right. But they cooked for them. I think my dad made a big curry and my mum made a big soup, both of which had meat in them. And the monks were vegetarians. Vegans, in fact, I think. So they turned up and we didn't know this. And we offered them the food and they ate it. But first off, they were really told us their story. My mum's fascinated by it. My dad's really nice, a very charismatic guy. So we were having a very nice chat, and they were telling us their story. And then they started doing these chants, over dinner, doing all these chants beforehand. And I was like, my goodness, this is so so otherworldly to me. And I was fascinated with them, especially this one guy who was nearly looked the same age as me, right? I felt like he could have been me. Anyway, we talked to them and we had a discussion, and they were staying. We had a dinner, and they later learned that they were obligated to eat this food we'd made for them, even though they were vegan. So they were doing that again. They were doing all this stuff just because they'd been offered something. They were saying they felt obligated to say yes. It's a great lesson. To repay favors, and maybe there's different ways of handling it if you're vegan, but I like and respect the way they went about things. And so we talked to them, and they were staying in the monastery, right? This is like a cold, rundown, leaky monastery where they were staying in a village I lived in for the time being, and talking to them, and mostly my mum, like she was really good at talking to people. She's a social worker, and she's got excellent people skills, and she's not afraid of asking tough questions. And in the end, we found out everything about these guys, right? My mum's great like that, and they were very open and honest with everything, and we found out that they didn't have any real clothes with them. And I felt terrible, especially for this one guy that was about my height, about my size, looked my age, seemed very much like me. I felt really terrible for them. So I was like, well, and Mum was saying, no, Jamie, you'll have some clothes you can give them. I trot them upstairs. This one guy was the only one who would accept them. I offered him, he would accept. And the other ones really we didn't have clothes that would fit them. So they didn't feel too obligated at that stage. But this guy did feel obligated. And we went up the stairs, and he told me as we were going, like I learned from there, between finishing dinner and getting to the wardrobe, that they were obligated to come when I'd offered. And they were obligated to eat the food when we give it to them. Offered it to them, sorry. And I felt at this point bad, because I realised that my enthusiasm that I'd put on these people for having a good time with us was maybe just projection, right? And that they were being nice by being here at that moment to me. At least that's what they were trying to do. And I'd fed them, or we'd fed them like the food they didn't want, and maybe interrupted their plans, and been probing them for all this information, which of course they'll have felt obligated to answer. And so we went to the wardrobe, and I opened it up, and at this stage he said to me, we're only really supposed to wear these colours, right? This maroony dark red and this orange. And I was like opening my wardrobe, and immediately when he said it, I knew what was going to happen, right? Because he said it as I was opening the doors, and I knew in my wardrobe I only had one thing that was that colour. And I'd only got it 2 or 3 days beforehand, right? It was this Tommy Hilfiger t-shirt that was like one of the most expensive things I'd ever bought at the time. And I'd loved it, right? And I'd wanted it for ages, and I'd actually fucking gone out of my way to save up for these things. And like, if you can imagine someone who's been expelled from multiple schools and that, like, they aren't usually the type of person who would save. And back then, this was a big deal to me. But as I was opening the wardrobe, I instantaneously knew that it was the only thing he'd be able to wear, and I would be obligated to offer it to him. And part of me was like, fuck, as you would be, right? As you would be. I was like, fuck, because I have to now give it to him. And at the same time, there's nothing in the world would stop me. But at the same time, there's also, at the same time, nothing in the world I less want to do, right? So I said, you'll like this t-shirt, and gave it to him. He, of course, didn't say anything about Tommy Hilfiger or whatever. He said it was nice, but he said, like, I really don't want to take your things and that. And I was like, well, I insist. In the same way they insisted on coming and eating dinner and being nice to me and the whole family, I insisted on him taking this t-shirt. So he took it, and then a number of and they left, and we didn't see them again. And it was a nice memory. And we thought to ourselves, we might never see those monks, and everyone, Mum and Dad and Rich and I, thought it was a really nice experience and laughed about it, because it's hilarious, right? The food and the vegan stuff and the t-shirt story. It was all quite funny. And then a few days later, I was back at school because the suspension had ended, and I was given this job of running the school magazine. I was like, well, what am I going to do, like, for this fucking job they've given me, the twats? But at the same time, like, it's something, and maybe it'll look good, and maybe I'll use it in future in life, and maybe it'll be fun, right? So we'll try this shit out. Also, it's my fucking magazine now, so I'm going to fucking see what I can get away with. And so I looked at, what's happening. I looked and I saw there was a story in the Irish Times or the Belfast News, one of the two, can't remember which at this moment in time, right? But one, a newspaper, probably it was being a Northern Ireland newspaper because it was very bigoted and it was full of lots of bullshit. And there was a story on the front page from was it the mayor of Belfast at the time, talking about how the Dalai Lama was coming to Northern Ireland to get an honorary degree from Queen's Belfast, but he needn't stick his fucking nose into our business until he sorted out his own problems at home, and he wasn't interested in hearing his take on the peace process, right? And that's a very typical attitude that you'll get from a lot of people in Northern Ireland. No offence to everyone at generally, big fan of Ireland. And it's all one people. And so, so he had this fucking arsehole attitude. And I was like, well, you know, there's a fucking newspaper. I'm reading this. I'm supposed to be writing this fucking newspaper for the school. Like, I wonder if when the Dalai Lama comes to Northern Ireland, like, what's up there, what's happening, you know, is there anything we can get up on to do there? And I didn't really think that we'd ever be able to see the Dalai Lama, but I did notice that there was this thing called the World Peace Conference. It was being hosted in Belfast, right? The World Peace Conference hosted in Belfast. Telling me about there's an irony there. Don't. But I'll not get into it anyway. So, sort of suppose I am, haven't I? So, we arranged with the school that we'd go to this, right? We'd go with a couple of different people who were like, one of them was the school pastor, right? Another was a Christian brother that worked there. And then a selection of other students who also worked for this magazine, right? The school magazine / newspaper. So we managed to swing that, and we were going to this World Peace Conference anyway. So we turned up in the morning, drove up to Belfast in this shitty school bus. The whole while listening to like absolute nonsense, over the top Catholics who a disdain for other perspectives. These particular teachers were really bigoted. Anyway, we were driving up to this thing, and we were talking about things, and their disdain for other religions was quite apparent to me at the time. Anyway, really, by the time we arrived, and it was an hour and a half on the bus, I was seriously fucked off with these people I was with. Never mind, like, I knew I was going to go into a room full of bigger versions of the same kind of arseholes. And so we turned up into this World Peace Conference where there was lots of different schools who'd managed to get people on board and different teachers there. And we were late, and we walked into this big room where a politician, I think his name was Nigel Dodds, but it may have been a different fatty-faced fucking gimp, who was stood on stage reading out questions, right? And it wasn't obvious to me, but that's, for whatever reason, right, it was obvious to everybody else immediately what was going on, right? This chump on stage was reading out options, and there was 4 corners in this big hall that had like different colours on them in the corner, and like depending on how you felt about the options he was reading out, you'd go and stand in one of these corners, right? And I'm fucking not up for that shit at all, right? That cringy, mass cringe bollocks, right? I'm like, that is the last thing on earth that I'm interested in, right? It makes me want to be fucking sick thinking about it. So instantly I was like, what the fuck is going on here? And then the things that the tube was saying were like things that I didn't agree with. I instantly didn't agree with any of them, right? And his 4 options he given me, I was like, I'm not particularly interested in these fucking options. Never mind this pathetic nonsense that's going on at the minute. So I'm not standing in your fucking corner, right? And I actually, like, where's the fucking door? Like, this is fucking bollocks. Anyway, so I just stood there, and after a while I started ignoring that he was even reading things out, because, like, I'm not interested, and, like, you know, it was my space as soon as I walked in it. He can shut the fuck up. I don't care what he's playing there. Anyway, so he starts saying this shit, and like after a while it becomes obvious I'm just stood in the middle of this big hall and everybody else is moving around to these corners and that, and he starts having a go, right? He's like, oh, you've got some problem. I was just ignoring him. And then he'd say another one, and at this stage he got really fucked off, and he was talking about jail, right? And he was talking about this particular issue they have in Northern Ireland with political prisoners, right? Now this is a very, very sensitive topic anywhere in the world, right? Particularly in Northern Ireland, and there's extreme irony if you know anything about the Dalai Lama's history with this comment. So on one hand, like, I was already fucked off, then this guy actually picks on me, right? Now I'm sure he looked like he thought I was trying to pick on him by not conforming to his stupid thing, but the truth is, like, I don't have to. You should shut the fuck up. And then So he starts saying shit to me in front of everyone. That really fucking started pissing me off. And then his next question afterwards was about jails, right? And he was like, "Do you believe in political prisoners? Do you think they should be separate together? Do you think we should have political prisoners all in this thing?" And it was supposed to be an example of showing these extreme divide in people's opinion from either side of the religious divide in Northern Ireland. And I assume that he was going to go on to ask questions that would then have mixed up the demographics between the responses and answers, so we could all see that despite having differences, we had similarities, right? This was the path he was on. And if you play those sort of amateur games and you're anything over than like 6 or 7 months old, then you've got a fucking mental problem, right? And I wasn't interested in it. So I wasn't fucking playing his stupid game, and I wanted to leave. Anyway, then he asked a question about jails, and that fucking pissed me off, right? Because I actually do have an opinion on that. I do have a fucking opinion on that, and none of the options he were given were good enough. So when he turned around to say something to me again, I walloped him. "Shut the fuck up, you fat bastard. I'm not playing your stupid fucking games. And I disagree with all the options you've just put on the table there. I actually do have an opinion on this, and I think this whole thing is fucking absurd." At which point, before I'd got most of that out, he was shouting in his microphone for me to shut up. He was really pissed off at me. Never met the guy, right? And I was a number of yards away from him, so... Anyway, so he was asked me to leave, and a number of other people wanted me to leave. And as those people were approaching me, asking me to leave, I was looking around, as you do when people fucking walk towards you, to see what the environment was. And this door opened in the wall, which door that maybe wasn't even looked like a door to me beforehand, right? In these high wooded panelled rooms. And behind that door was my friend, the monk, wearing my Tommy Hilfiger t-shirt. And he nodded at me. And he'd obviously been there for a while, right? He'd obviously seen this situation evolving. And I was like, "Hey, sweet." So I just turned around and walked out that door. I have no idea what would have happened. I just stayed there. I wouldn't have got anything positive out of it. There was plenty of teachers from my school who saw this all happening. So that would have been like bad. And I just got back to school from being suspended, and I'd just been put in charge of the school magazine. And they were giving me responsibility. And if I'd handled it in that sort of a way, it would have fucked me off. And this was just before my A-level exams. I think that was when it was. And just before that, my mum had been diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. So I was fucking angry. But I was born angry, so 141.16. So I walked through that door, and I walked down the corridor with the guy, and he was like, "Oh, come with me," and he opened another door and walked in, and Dalai Lama's there. And the Dalai Lama's obviously just sat down, and I got the impression that he's just sat down, having seen me talking, and thought, "Oh, here's a situation I can have a positive effect on." And he did it in a really nice way. And it just so happened that he'd obviously spoke to this guy who was sent to get me, and he'd heard that this t-shirt came from me, and he probably had a little chuckle with him about where the t-shirt came from and the whole story that I had also thought was funny. And here I am in a room with the Dalai Lama, who sits down and he asked me if I want a cup of tea. A couple of minutes ago, I was thinking about fucking smashing some fuck. And here we are, in like a completely serene and completely crazy situation. It felt to me like, wow, this is so unusual, but also this is so it's just a continuation of a pattern that's been happening for a while. And he's like, "Oh, you seem so stressed out." And we chatted and talked about things, and like I said, "Oh, I am stressed out, I was a little bit annoyed when I read this thing in the newspaper, and then I'm up here and this and that, and I felt like angry on your behalf and so on. And worried and pissed off. And I've got these other things in life, and floods out of you." Anyway, so then we talked for a while. I talked about my mum. He talked about how it made me feel. I talked about how it made me worried. And he talked about how he knew what it was like to worry. He talked about how when the Chinese came and kicked him out of his house and arrested his brothers literal brothers and his odd fellow monks, and beat them and tortured them, put them in prison, many of which are still in prison today, having done nothing but believe in Buddhism. Likely still being tortured. And he talked about how he was filled with worry, but he got over that through understanding that how the futility of worrying and how there's no benefit to it. In fact, you're wasting time you could be spending doing other things. And in my case, that was being happy, enjoying time with my mum, and not worrying for something that I couldn't change. And we had a nice talk, and then went for a wee walk. After which he came back and somebody came and told him he'd go and get his honorary degree. So I went in with him to the place where he was getting it. And he walked up and got his degree. There was photographs taken and stuff. I got one with him. Quite a funny one. And then I went home to school and I wrote this article up about, I called it "A Dilly Dally with the Dalai Lama." And the school didn't fucking print it. And I asked why they didn't print it, and they said it was because that it wasn't the right message to put out there, because Buddhists believe in reincarnation, and that was a way of absolving yourself from your sins, and that it wasn't the message of Jesus Christ, and so it wasn't something that they were going to be including in the school magazine. Right? That's how stupid this school was. This, which is at the time had their exam results, I think, were the third best in Britain. That's how stupid this school was. Not within many days, not many days of that later that happening, there was another riot at school where hundreds of people were trying to attack Rocky and I, smashing bus windows. A bus drove over Rocky's foot as he was getting attacked by people. It was a really dangerous environment, and I got so fed up with it. You know, it wasn't the dilly dally with the Dalai Lama that flipped the switch. It was what was happening to my brother and me that pissed me off. And so I spoke to the school, told the headmaster, "Look, can you keep us safe here? You know, can you?" And like, no, and the answer was no. And he said no. And I said, "Well, I'm not fucking coming back. I'm going to leave now. I'm never coming back to this school. I'm still doing my exams here. And you'll be fucking lucky if I don't sue you." And he was lucky I didn't sue him. Anyway, we never went back to that school, other than to do our exams. And when we did them, I came first in 2 of my subjects in the country. And they wouldn't even have fucking let me in if it hadn't been for Rocky. So I pulled their average up. Just like we're pulling up the moving averages now. I had a nice time with the Dalai Lama. I had a nice chance meeting that helped me feel good about the rest of my life and stop worrying and enjoy time like with my mum. And that was approximately 18 years ago. My mum's still fine, and I've had many happy memories since. And I don't worry, but I do get fucking angry, and I do get very emotional, but I don't worry as much. And so there is no, like, there are things in life that's easy to worry about. And I can understand why people would want you to worry about price action. But I'm here to tell you that not only do you not need to worry about price action, because even if the squeeze doesn't happen, you give it a 5-year time horizon and you look at this just as a value stock, it should easily be between $2,000 and $3,000 and $4,000, $5,000 a share, depending on what GameStop do. And I can see that being even a shorter time period than that, and easily this thing being worth money. So if you're not over leveraged, if you're not leveraged at all, preferably, you don't have too much of a position that you can't afford to live your life without stress, then you can sit on this position knowing that there are millions, literally millions of other people doing the same thing as you.